Okay, I've been going through Judges for some time now. We've actually finally made it through the time of the Judges. Even though the book continues on and tells us more stories, there's really just two more stories. But these stories are separate from the time of the Judges because one actually takes place at the beginning of the time of Judges before, and the other takes place after. The story is actually at the beginning of Judges, and I'll explain how we know that throughout the teaching when we get to those parts. But Judges so far, we've seen the first two chapters, their review of Joshua, his death, and Israel's beginning to serve Baals and other things. And this story actually is that beginning. We see in the chapters 3 through 16, we see the Judges, and it's sort of a pattern of things that happen. Israel serves false gods. Another people group rules over Israel. Israel cries out to Jehovah. God sends a deliverer. Now, a lot of people say there at that part, God delivers the people. That is true. But I say God sends a deliverer because the people didn't hold on to what God was doing. Israel cries out, did I send that? God sends a deliverer. Israel is at peace, usually during the judge's life. And then the judge dies, and it all begins again. So, we're going to be reading Judges 17, 1 through 5. Now, there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim, whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here's the silver with me, I took it." And his mother said, "May you be blessed by Jehovah, my son." So when he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, "I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to Jehovah for my son to make a carved image and a molded image. Now therefore I will return it to you." Thus he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and a molded image. And they were in the house of Micah. The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod and household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons to become his priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. I went to verse 6. I said 5, but went on to verse 6 there. So Micah, the name Micah, it means who is like Jehovah. And I read this and I thought, I don't think they said that as a question, who is like Jehovah. They said it almost like my son, who is like Jehovah. It was more of a statement as this child's name. Micah comes from the word Micah Yahu, and it means God, or who is like God, or who is like Jehovah. We see in verse 2 that he stole from his mother. The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and on you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here's the silver with me, I took it. But he returned the silver. Why did he return the silver? Because it had been cursed. He didn't return the silver because he had a change of heart. He didn't return the silver because he was turning over a new leaf. He returned the silver because it had been cursed. And we see that in verse 3 and verse 2 again. We see that it was cursed, and then his mother, "May you be blessed by Jehovah, my son." So when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to Jehovah for my son. We also see that he was from a very wealthy family. 1,100 pieces of silver or shekels or whatever you want to call it was a lot. Jump ahead to verse 10 in 17. And Micah said to him, "Dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes and your sustenance." So 10 shekels of silver was considered equivalent for a year's wage. We see that right there. So he had 110 times that he had taken. And it didn't seem like their family was out of it. It just was a lot of money that they wished they had back. So he came from a very wealthy family. He created an ephod, he created idols, and he consecrated his son as a priest. These were all things that he did not have the power to do. I want you to turn to Exodus 28, 6:14, and when we talk about an ephod, we're not talking about just an undercovering, or we're talking about the priestly garments. Exodus 28, 6 through 14. And they shall make the ephod of gold, purple, blue, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen, artistically worked. It shall have 2 shoulder straps joined at its 2 edges, and so it shall be joined together. An intricately woven band of the ephod which is on it shall be of the same workmanship, made of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen. Then you shall take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel. 6 of their names on one stone, and 6 of their names on the other stone, in order of their birth, with the work of an engraver in stone, like the engravings of a signet. You shall engrave the 2 stones with the names of the sons of Israel. You shall set them in settings of gold. You shall put the 2 stones on the shoulders of the ephod as memorial stones for the sons of Israel. So Aaron shall bear their names before Jehovah on the 2 shoulders as memorial. You shall also make settings of gold, and you shall make 2 chains of pure gold, like braided cords, and fasten the braided chains to the settings. If you notice in this story, his mother says, "These are dedicated to Jehovah," or "I give these to my son in the name of Jehovah." It is not said by Micah. Micah is not making these things for Jehovah. He is making them to lift himself up, to make himself like a god. He's consecrating his son to be his priest, not the priest of Jehovah. I think Micah gave this story to show how confused Israel was in the beginning of their cycle of the following false gods. I think he also wanted to put these 2 stories together to show how much things really don't change. Craig says this a lot. He says, we can look back and see that the same evil things that are happening today happened back then. They may be growing, or we might be more in tune to them because of the internet or things like that, or just because we've got more people in the world, who knows? More evil because there's more people. But those things aren't something new. There's nothing new under the sun. And also we look at this mother And there's something else Craig said a couple weeks ago that really hit me. He said, without justice, mercy is just enabling. And what this mother did, without bringing any justice upon her son, or bringing any of this to light, she just enabled him to take advantage of her even further. We're going to continue to Judges 17, 6 through 13, and read what happens next. In those days, there was no, I read that part, but I wanted to read it again. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. I read some commentaries this week. They said this was said to show you that this was at the beginning of Judges because there was no king. I don't believe that, because it's said again later in the next story. And I think it's to show that this whole time of Judges, there was no king. And we have to remember that even Samuel said that God was to be their king. They were supposed to have a king. Jehovah was supposed to be their king. It's not supposed to be a man, but at this time there's no one saying this is against the law, this is wrong. Everyone's just doing what they want in their own eyes. Now, there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. I was just going to read past this part and come back to it, but I think I want to stop here and bring this up. So I want you to hear it. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite. Does that make sense to anyone? No. I think the NIV says this a lot better than the New King James. And later we'll find out who this person is, and we know exactly what family he's from. But right here, NIV says, a young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah who had been living with the clan of Judah. So, there were Levites at this time that would live in cities, and they would teach the people. He wasn't there doing that. He was there looking for something to do. He was a Levite traveling, and he got there. He's like, well, I'll stick around here. But he wasn't performing the duties of a Levite at that time, or he wouldn't have needed to leave. So he's left, and now he's out roaming around. And he comes to Micah's house. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. As he journeyed, and Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" So he said to him, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am on my way to find a place to stay." Micah said to him, "Dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance." So the Levite went in. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man. The young man became like one of the sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that Jehovah will be good to me, since I have a Levite as a priest." This is the first time that Micah mentions Jehovah. He only mentions him because he believes that this will bring him in good standing, having a Levite paid to be his priest. This is a young man. We know he's a father, but he may have been fatherless. But he takes it on himself to take those things and try to live according to what he understands, and he's very confused, very messed up. But now we're going to continue on and see what happens next. And this is where we find out when the time is, when the time this is happening is. In those days, we're in 18, starting at, we're going to be reading verses 1 through 6. In those days, there was no king in Israel. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For until that day, their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territories, men of valor from Zoar and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. They said to them, "Go search the land." So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. While they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here?" He said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." So they said to him, "Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous." Okay. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself. This tells us when this time is. Please turn with me to Judges 1. We're going to be going to verse 34. And the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains, for they would not allow them to come down to the valley. And the Amorites were determined to dwell in the Mount Heres and Ajalon and in Shalbim. Yet when the strength of the house of Joseph became greater, they were put under tribute. I don't know if you noticed in Craig's reading today, in Revelations, there was 144,000 people mentioned and 12,000 from each tribe. There was a tribe missing. Did anyone notice that? Yep. It was the tribe of Dan. Yep. The Danites didn't claim their land. And because of that, I don't want to say they're left out of the king. I'm not sure about that, but they're not stamped as one of the 12 tribes in the final revelation. They lost out on their inheritance. This may have been why, because they never accepted that land. They took it from someone else. Not only that, we're going to see that they do also worship these false idols and these things. So we'll get to that now. Picking up in Judges 7. I think that's where I left off. Yep. So the 5 men departed. Judges 18, verse 7. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there, how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, "What is your report?" Before we go on, I want to point this out too. The Sidonians were there, and yes, they should have been kicked out, and they weren't. But this still wasn't the land of the Danites. This wasn't their place to kick them out. It wasn't their place to remove these people. They had people to remove in their own land. They needed to take care of business where they needed to take care of business. It wasn't their job to do this. And they are going to attack a peaceful people. So they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter to possess the land. When you go, you will come for a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." And 600 men of the family of the Danites went from Zorah and Eshtaol, armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped in Kiriath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they call that place Mehana Dan, which just means the camp of Dan, to this day. There it is, west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim, and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone out to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, "Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molded image?" What do they see? What do these men see? They see this wealth. They see, oh look, this guy's wealthy. We can go take what he has and worship it, and we will be wealthy. Do you understand? This is what starts the cycle. We look around and we say, this isn't good enough for me. I want what they have. And how did they get it? And we take on things and we listen to the world and I shouldn't say we, sorry. But so many times humans are driven by excess and what they see others have. And it begins a cycle, this evil cycle of falling down, realizing you need God, calling on Him and Him coming to your aid again. And this is what started that whole cycle, or this is what I believe the writer is telling us started that whole cycle. So they turned aside from marching to the town and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. Hey, just wanting to see how you're doing, right? The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went up. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. The priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and priest to us. It is better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel." So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. If we broke down and looked at this priest, we'd see that he couldn't get a job in Judah. They didn't want him. He couldn't find a job with people. He found this man that needed a priest for himself. And now this tribe wants him as their priest. And so he's thrilled. He's excited. He's ecstatic. Someone wants me. And it's sad how far people have gone when we get to that part. Then they turned and departed and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, The men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned around and said to Micah, "What ails you, that you have gathered such a company?" Now again, Micah wasn't doing what was right, and this should have been stopped. But for them to come and his graciousness to be a host to them, and then they take his things and leave and give no explanation, and then say, "What ails you? What's wrong?" So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you have gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, 'What ails you?'" And the children of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life, with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. So they took the things Micah had made, and the priest who had belonged to him, and went to Laish, to a people quiet and secure. And they struck them with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. So we have this one evil man who takes it upon himself to make false gods, molded images. He takes a priest for himself. He consecrates his son to be a priest. None of the things he had the power to do. But this infected all of Israel, a whole tribe, the tribe of Dan. And we see it grow throughout the scriptures. It doesn't lessen, it doesn't become defeated, it becomes more and more. There was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born of Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. And Jonathan, this was the priest. Listen to who he is. The son of Gershon, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of captivity of the land. This says here, son of Manasseh, right? That's not what the original text says. Does anyone know who it is? Moses. This is Moses' grandson. That's also another way we know this is the beginning of Judges. The time frame wouldn't fit. He couldn't have been at the end of Judges. This is Moses. The reason why it's changed is because more texts now say Manasseh. There are a few that were known before Babylon, and it does say Moses, and there was one text found that actually has the notation of Manasseh on top, because, now this is speculation, but a lot of people say that the scribe writing it was like, I feel like this is sacrilegious, whatever you want to call it, to write the name of Moses here. And so he made a notation over the name of Moses, making it look like Manasseh, but it's well known that it was Moses. I mean, it's been proven, it's accepted. So this is Moses' grandson that we see here, that couldn't find a job, that didn't know the ways of Jehovah, who told the people that they could go in peace to wreck a city that was causing no issues. How far have the people fallen that quickly? After the death of Joshua, we see that already they had become given to idols and idol worship. And so throughout the whole book of Judges, we see these this thing continually going on. The sons were the priests of the tribe of Dan. Okay. And his sons, Jonathan's sons, were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Oh. Shabbat shalom.